Ted, thanks so much for the over-generous introduction. And no, it's not a slight on how long it took. That's just a comment on the content. Is there a little feedback here? I'm sorry. Okay. I'm going to try and keep this to 8 or 10 minutes, tell one or two stories that get back to this theme of sneaking into places that the Pakistani government would have rather me not have gone into. I'm going to talk mostly about SWAT, which Malcolm was recently there about 2 months ago. I was there about 2 years ago, so we can kind of hear as to how things have developed since then as well, if he cares to come back full circle. But in the fall of 2007, about a year and a half into a fellowship that I had been living in Pakistan on behalf of, from the Institute of Current World Affairs, I started working on a piece for the New York Times Magazine called Next Gen Taliban, and it was largely a profile of this emergent new generation of Taliban following the government storming of the Red Mosque in July of 2007. And what I found so compelling about the story idea was that these Taliban were no longer under the control and under the authority of the traditional authority structures that had fostered the first generation of Taliban. That being, they were no longer abiding by the tribal authorities. They were no longer under the control of the religious parties, the mainstream religious parties that often use conventional politics, parliamentary politics, as sort of a shield and a cover for jihadist activities. And finally, they were no longer under the control even of the intelligence agencies, which by most conventional histories claims that the Pakistani intelligence agencies largely created the Taliban in southern Afghanistan in 1996. So I was doing the profile of this one individual who was this middle-aged mullah who was undergoing this sort of midlife crisis. And this was a guy that had been referring to Mullah Omar's Taliban, the Afghan Taliban, as our boys, and was considered sort of a godfather of the Taliban. And yet now the Pakistani Taliban were rocketing his house, and that's firing rockets at, not throwing rocks at. And this guy's life was severely under threat. So this is the character study of what happens when the Taliban sort of go wild. But I needed to meet the younger generation and be able to kind of figure out what was making them tick. So in October of 2007, I through a mutual friend arranged to meet a young journalist in Mingora, the main city in Swat, which is about 4 hours northwest from Islamabad. And I was going to go spend several days there with him as a guest of the SWAT, the Pakistani Taliban. And this was a time that, it was a really interesting time because the Taliban were very much playing for public sympathies. And they were interested in having journalists. They hadn't sort of turned the corner yet where they had lost all inclinations towards providing some sort of alternative judicial structure. I think now they are no longer sort of, it's not a hearts and minds game anymore, it's a pure terror game in my assumption. But again, this is a bit dated. Malcolm can comment on that better. So in October of 2007, we get in, and I come in on a Wednesday evening, and my fixer translator, and just as a quick word, I mean, these fixers who are translators, guides, a second pair of eyes, a second gut instinct, in all throughout any good coverage throughout the developing world that you see is largely a result and is a much better gauge of how good the fixer is than how good the journalist is, in fact. And so this was a prime example where I show up and this fixer says, quick, let's go to the hotel, drop your bags, because we're going to meet this Taliban leader for dinner this evening. And I thought, all right, well, this is how we start off right. You know, this is how we get moving. I'm only here for 3 days. This will be good. So it's during the holy month of Ramadan, and we're going to break the fast with this guy. And he lives about 2 hours outside of Mingora, way up in the pine forest. And so he was going to meet us on the outskirts of Mingora, jump in our car, and then we were going to all travel to his house together, break the fast, whatnot. Well, as we started leaving Mingora, my fixer gets a phone call from someone who says, listen, the reports that the Taliban have set up roadblocks all outside of the city. And they're stopping cars, they're looking for spies, they're looking for improperly covered women, and they're looking for tape decks or CD players playing un-Islamic music. So I'm sitting in the back seat with having dyed my hair, with a shalwar kameez, the local clothes on, essentially in a really bad disguise, feeling like this is not going to work like I thought it was going to work 2 hours ago. And so we call up to our buddy here. His name was Iqbal Khan, and he was waiting on the outskirts of town. And we said, listen, Iqbal, this is my fixer saying this. We hear that the Talibs have set up a roadblock, and we've got this American journalist in the back seat, and this isn't going to be good. Iqbal says, quick, give me a description of your car and give me the license plate number, and don't worry about it. Now, people often wonder how these foreign al-Qaeda leaders and groups are able to base themselves up and down the border areas. And hospitality cannot be overemphasized, and the importance of connections cannot either. So Iqbal Khan, who was made the offer, he's hosting us this evening, says, don't worry about it. He puts in a call, and around the next bend we come, and there are 4 flatbed trucks with about 50 to 70 Taliban in the back of each one. Rocket launchers, AK-47s, long hair, floppy caps. And I'm in the back seat thinking, oh man, all right, this is it, right? this is the beginning, this is the end, this is, and so I've got my nose in an Urdu newspaper, and I'm pretending to read, but I'm kind of flipping down the page as we're getting closer, because this is something that you don't want to make eye contact with anyone, but by the same token, you don't get to drive through a Taliban roadblock every day. So you want to try and soak in as much as you can. And as we pull up to the roadblock, they're pulling over every car. We look in the car behind us, and the young ladies are pulling their headscarves up, and everyone is obviously very nervous. And every car is getting pulled over, trunks are getting popped open, people are out, the Taliban are searching the cars. And we inch up, and the Talibs take a quick look at our car, look at each other, part, and wave us through. And I thought, all right, well, look, I don't know who Iqbal Khan is that's waiting for us, around the next bend, but obviously he's got a little bit of pull. So Iqbal gets in the car, and he can see that we're sweating and nervous, and he can probably see that my heart is thumping out of my neck. And he starts busting out laughing. He says, don't worry, I told you, you are guests of the Taliban this weekend, and we'll take care of you. So again, I don't know whether you're supposed to take that, is that supposed to comfort you or not? But anyway, so Iqbal gets in the car with us, and we drive to his house for dinner that evening. And as we're breaking the fast, Iqbal senses that I'm having a pretty good time, no doubt about it. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and I think that Iqbal begins confusing empathy for sympathy. And so Iqbal takes out his cell phone, and he wants to now start showing me some of the videos that he's downloaded of he and his colleagues, supporters, fellow Talibs, blowing up American convoys in Afghanistan and Iraq. Mostly in Afghanistan. The others were, friends had sent him the ones from Iraq. It's a little uncomfortable for me for 2 reasons. My father is a Marine general, and my brother is a Marine lieutenant who at the time was serving in Iraq fighting against jihadis. So Iqbal starts showing the videos, and I'm trying to figure out a way. This is not the time, and it's, night's fallen, we're in the middle of this pine forest. Iqbal's already shown us a bunch of guns. Now is not the time to stand up and say, my father and brother are part of the crusading army that you swore in your life against, and I just want to make that clear. I can't watch these videos any longer. So I changed the subject, and Iqbal and I start talking about Islamic philosophy and jihadist philosophy. And I thought, okay, I've got a philosophy major. This is when I really need to put it to use. Here we go. And Iqbal asked me if I've ever read Osama bin Laden's philosophy book. And I said, no, I haven't, but now would be a great time to. We can stop watching the DVDs, and we can sort of switch the focus of this conversation. And so Iqbal brings me into another room, adjoining the room where we were sitting. And he's got this bookshelf set up that is sort of all of his al-Qaeda, Taliban paraphernalia. A letter signed from Mullah Omar thanking him for making an aid delivery, weapons that he has allegedly recovered from American soldiers in Kunar province just across the border in Afghanistan, and then a bunch of DVDs. And at the bottom there's a backpack, and he says, the book is in that knapsack, and I promised the person who left that knapsack that I wouldn't touch it until he returned. And I'm like, all right, well, Iqbal, we've got Mullah Omar's signed thing, we've got the 9mm Beretta, issued by the U.S. Army, we've got the AK-47s here, there, and everywhere. I said, so who left this bag that you're so worried about? And he said, well, this bag was left here by Ayman al-Zawahiri, who's al-Qaeda's number 2. And I thought, all right, so now things are getting a little bit creepy. Now we've got the sense that people have been here that I definitely should not be in the same room. And so I went back into the adjoining room and made eye contact with my fixer and said, hey, listen, we should scoot. And so that evening we went back, made the 2-hour drive back through the roadblocks, no issues. On Friday morning, we were set to go to meet the main militant leader. His name was Maulana Fazlullah, and it was we were going to go for the Friday prayer, and then after the Friday prayer, these Taliban, which were a bit more hardcore, had promised that they were going to there was going to be a big sort of rollout party.